The report says Mrs Maguire committed and condoned gross acts of physical and psychological abuse towards the children in her care. It adds she understood that a policy existed which forbade the use of corporal punishment. But she breached this policy by inflicting, allowing and condoning physical punishments. She also inflicted, allowed and condoned severe physical abuse and psychological abuse on the children in her care.
Anything we did wrong would be punished for. If we spoke out of turn, we'd get our mouth washed out with soap, whack us with wooden spoons, slippers. If we broke something, we'd get hit with it. I was made to wear nappies up until the age of 10, 11, till Audrey took over because I had a bedwetting problem.
Joyce Simons lived next door to the Maguires in the mid-80s.
Alan Maguire was the one who actually inflicted the punishment, and that Jane just stood by and watched it happen and held them, and he used to push the soap into the mouth and make sure that it all got pushed in, and that they were hit about the head, slapped about the head. I wish I'd have done something earlier, and then they wouldn't have suffered like they did. That's all I can say.
In all, we've spoken to 5 victims of alleged abuse carried out by the Maguires at the home. All tell similar stories, stories of a brutal regime of sustained physical abuse. In 1990, 2 part-time members of staff alerted social services to the Maguires' behaviour. An investigation was carried out, although former residents we spoke to say they were never questioned. In fact, the couple were allowed to retire from running the Blanche-Pierre home. Jane Maguire was moved into another job within social services.
It should have gone to the police then. Even if it didn't go to the police, they should have been sacked immediately. The notion of then just moving them and letting them carry on working in an environment where there are vulnerable people, it's just utterly extraordinary.
That's sick. It's wrong. No one who treated children like that should even be back into the care of children or in any part of that kind of job.
I was disgusted because we were told that she was sacked and that she would never work with young children or vulnerable people or elderly people ever again. She shouldn't even be out. She should have been locked up.
8 years later, in 1998, one former resident complained to the police. The case got as far as a magistrate's court. The children, many of whom are now in their 20s, say they were told they'd make unreliable witnesses. The case was abandoned.
The day they told us in that room at social services, and they said that we wouldn't handle going to royal court and they have gotten enough evidence, I knew they were taking the piss. And I swore to that, I told them not to contact me ever again, because we'd had to drag all this up for them to say all this. And for it basically to be swept onto the table, and we have to get on with it like, there you go, it's done and dusted, get on with your life. Nothing was ever done.
But the 1999 report did find Jane Maguire guilty of gross misconduct and recommended her dismissal. So 10 years after the first complaints, Jane Maguire finally left social services employment. Senator Sivray claims the whole episode is typical of the way abuse complaints are managed in the island.
I think it's a fundamental problem with the system of public administration in Jersey. There is no adequate separation of powers. There's an unhealthy overlap between the legislature and the judiciary. But the departments of the states themselves, the people who work in them and who perhaps ought to be regulating and monitoring each other, they know each other, they're friends. They go to each other's dinner parties. And they have a common and shared interest, of course, in maintaining the veneer that everything in all the services are working just fine. Therefore, whenever anything goes wrong, they have a collective interest in wanting to bury it and keep it all hushed up.
We asked the island's chief minister for an interview, but he refused. The States did, however, confirm the Maguires were arrested and charged, but the indictment was withdrawn because of a lack of evidence.
Greenfields was opened in 2005 by the State of Jersey as a secure unit.
In a bid to show that life for troubled youngsters here in Jersey is improving, journalists were given a photo opportunity at Greenfields. The new multi-million-pound Children's Secure Unit opened only last year. Though the authorities want the media to see this example of how Jersey is now dealing with its young people in a responsible way, it's not the whole story. Last month, our political reporter Martin Oates investigated claims of an abusive regime at Greenfields.
Troubled 13-year-old Christopher Knights was a promising and gifted young musician. He developed an early alcohol addiction which left his mother unable to cope, and after a series of petty crimes, Chris ended up in Les Chenes, Jersey's only secure home for children, in summer 2002. His behaviour was, by any standards, unacceptable, and it got worse. He says he was placed in isolation for more than 2 months, with only 2 family visits per week. He was 14 years old.
Following a kick-off, I was put into a cell basically for about 2 weeks, and then following that I was basically in a room completely isolated for about 2 months, and I became clinically depressed. I broke down, I started self-harming. There were no illusions that I should be kept in complete isolation, which has caused my depression, which is something I still suffer with today.
7 years ago, British childcare expert Dr. Cathy Bull compiled a confidential report into the care of children at Les Chenes.
In August 2001, Dr. Bull's report was handed to the authorities. It was damning, criticising facilities, procedures, policies and staff. Les Chenes was an institution under-functioning and with serious weaknesses.
In particular, she singled out the regular use of isolation for criticism, saying, "The routine use of the secure suite for all young people on entry is most unacceptable." In the wake of the Bull report, Les Chenes was rebranded as Greenfields, before eventually being rehoused in a new state-of-the-art building on the same site. But it's now clear the use of solitary confinement was still official policy at the home until the old building closed in 2006. Simon Bellwood moved to Jersey from the UK to take up the post of manager at Greenfields. He was immediately concerned by the behaviour management regime then in place, the so-called Grand Prix system. This stipulated that all children would be isolated for 24 hours on arrival. After that, they would be rewarded for good behaviour, but sent to the pits, locked up for 24 hours in almost total isolation, if they misbehaved. This was clearly explained to new residents in an introductory document.
What concerned me the most, perhaps, was that it was quite clear that this system was able to go on and it was able to be common practice and commonplace within the secure facility without a single senior manager, inspector actually picking up that this system was abusive to children.
Mr. Bellwood says he took his concerns to the highest levels and was then sacked. The States of Jersey claim he was incompetent, though Mr. Bellwood disputes this and is pursuing a wrongful dismissal case. We went to Greenfields to meet his former boss, Joe Kennedy, who showed us